So, spoiler alert, this is gonna be a story of my Weber conversion, kind of like a prequel. So after the fact, sum up all the issues I had, and there are gonna be some videos I'm gonna post that will show a visual of some of the stuff. So I bought this truck 6 years ago, not running. I towed it home and wanted to get it running to make sure it ran. So I played around with the carburetor a little bit, found it wasn't getting gas, so I pulled the top off, and this is the OEM carburetor, and the float was stuck and bowl was dirty and everything, so I cleaned it all out, put it back together, and got it running, and barely ran, wouldn't drive, just kept running out of gas. So I troubleshot it, found out the gas tank, which had been sitting for who knows how long, was full of rust, just completely rusted on the inside, and the fuel line was full of rust, and I don't know how any gas ever even got into that carburetor. But anyway, changed out all the lines, cleaned everything up, put a new fuel tank, put it all back together, and it ran okay, but then it needed brakes. So I kind of let it sit for the next 5 years or so until I retired this year. Early in January this year I retired, so then I decided to play around with it. So then I pulled the carburetor off and completely rebuilt it, put a whole new kit in it, and I put a whole new rebuild kit in the carburetor and all the jets and floats and all that kind of stuff, and put it all back together. It ran pretty good. It had some hesitation at certain ranges, and I kept hearing about this Weber, and a lot of people said it was great. Some people said don't do it. So after a long, hard thought out battle in my head, I decided to go with the Weber and see how it did. So that brings us up to here. Got the Weber, opened it all up, looked at the kit, and the first thing I noticed is the insulator down here is not included in the instructions, and the screws they give you to mount the adapter to the intake manifold, they're only long enough to go through the adapter. They wouldn't work. They'd be about an inch too short if you wanted to leave the insulator on there. In hindsight, I should have figured that out right away, but I didn't. So I took the insulator off, mounted the carburetor directly to the intake manifold, the adapter stack up, and the carburetor, put it all on there, and in so doing, one of these screws that goes into this base plate that holds on the adapter plate stripped out. The screw was, I think, that was a little too short. There's only a few threads were catching on the plate here, and it seemed inevitable that with a little bit of torque it was going to strip out. Pulled the threads out, so I went ahead and finished the stack up, and I got the screw to hold a little tiny bit, but it was tight as I wanted it to be. So when I finished the installation, started it all up, and it started immediately and ran. Sounded really good at idle. I could rev it up, and seemed like it was running okay. And then I let it warm up, and then I put the hood down, closed the hood, and opened the gate behind, and getting ready to go take it on a test drive, and it just died. Just sitting here in the driveway, just died. I'm like, the heck was that? So started it up, and it died again. And then I tried pumping the gas, and it would just die. It sounded like the carburetor was not getting any gas. Like the float was stuck. which is a spoiler alert also. I didn't want to believe that the float would be stuck on a brand new carburetor, so I was trying to figure out everything else. I read online in some forums that without the heat shield and the insulator, that fuel can get hot from the heat of the exhaust and basically vaporize, get a vapor lock, and the engine could quit when it's hot. So it seemed to be running when it was cold, running okay until it warmed up. So I kind of started focusing in on that, just because I didn't want to think there was something wrong with the carburetor. So I took it all off. Like, okay, is there some way to do this with and use the insulator and the heat shield? So all you really need is to get some longer screws. The ones they give you to hold this base plate to the manifold are just barely long enough to do that. So I went to the hardware store and they had exactly the same screws, only longer, and they were long enough to go all the way through the base plate, through the insulator into the manifold. Actually, they were a little too long. I had to trim them. I think I had to trim about 1/4 of an inch off of them, and that's going to be in the other video too. So I started putting, first I had to get helicoils. I put helicoils in all 4 of the holes in this plate for the screws that hold this plate to this plate, so I won't have to worry about them stripping out. I bought new screws, cap screws that hold this to here, longer ones, so that they would take advantage of the full thread length of this base plate, and so I would be able to tighten them down. So in the video you'll see me building this all back up. Got my heat shield and my insulator back there. One thing I'll talk about in the video is this bracket here with the original cable. It's 1970 Land Cruiser. The instructions are backwards. They want you to mount this bracket on the other side, on the valve cover side, but the cable really has to come in from this side so it can pull on the lever when you press on the gas. And I got it all back together and did the same thing. And then he was even doing it cold now. It didn't wait till it got warm. It just starving for gas. So I checked the fuel filter again. It was a brand new filter. I checked it. It's fine. Checked my fuel lines are clear. Put a fuel pressure gauge on it. I got 3 psi. Like, what the heck? So looking for vacuum leaks. I'm looking for anything I could find. And I talked to tech support at Redline a few times throughout this, and I was kind of focusing on the heat shield and the vapor lock issue, and they were saying they hadn't really heard of that before, and they put me in touch with a mechanic that actually does these conversions on Land Cruisers, and he hadn't heard of that before, and he says they take these insulators off all the time and don't use them. So in desperation, at the very end, I finally got a hold of another guy at Weber, the Redline Weber tech support, and I sent him a video of the engine stalling, and he's like, "Oh yeah, you're right. That sounds like it's not getting any gas." I said, "Well, what am I going to do? I don't want to void the warranty by taking it apart." He goes, "Well, you can go ahead and pull the top off. I'm not going to void the warranty." So I pulled the top of the carburetor off, and lo and behold, the choke was stuck. The fuel float was stuck. The needle wasn't moving, and the float didn't have enough travel to actually pull down on the needle and unseat it. But it was stuck. So I adjusted the float, let it go down farther, and by tech rep's suggestion, and now the needle was moving, and put it all back together, and it runs almost perfect. I think the needle has a little bit of machining marks on it. It looks a little rough. So they're sending me a new needle and seat to put in there. I did drive it the other day, 2 days ago, after I put it all back together. Drove it for 30 minutes, over 30 minutes, and it sputtered a couple of times. I think that needle might have been sticking again, and then maybe the vibration of driving it would shake it loose. So they got a new needle and seat on their way to me, and put that in there, and then try it again. But I found the problem. It was fuel starved all along. It wasn't the heat shield, it wasn't the insulator, wasn't anything else. The needle was actually sticking, and the float was not opening the needle. So that's the story, and you can see all the videos of all that. I'll try to number them in order, and if you're interested in seeing those. Anyway, thanks for listening. I hope you don't run into this problem yourselves if you're doing a Weber, but maybe it'll help somebody if they do have issues. Okay, thanks for listening. Bye.